The sun was just coming up over London. It was a special day that many people would remember forever. Today, King Charles would get his crown in a big ceremony called a coronation. All across the city, people were getting ready for this big event. At Kensington Palace, Prince William woke up early. He knew this was not just any day. It was the day his father would officially become king. William looked out the window at the beautiful gardens. He could already see people lining up on the streets. Some had waited all night to get a good spot to watch the royal family. "It's time to get ready," he said to himself. In another room, Kate was already awake. She stood in front of a large mirror while a helper fixed her hair. She wore a beautiful cream-colored dress that touched the floor. On her head was a small, sparkly headpiece that made her look even more like a princess. "Is everything ready for the children?" Kate asked one of the helpers. "Yes, Your Royal Highness. Their clothes are laid out, and their breakfast is being served now." Kate smiled. "Thank you. I'll go check on them." She walked down the hall to where George, Charlotte, and Louis were eating breakfast. At 10 years old, George was the oldest. He sat up straight, already trying to act grown-up. Charlotte, who was 8, was carefully eating so she wouldn't make a mess on her special outfit. 5-year-old Louis was playing with his food, making his nanny smile and shake her head. "Good morning, my darlings," Kate said, entering the room. All 3 children looked up. "Good morning, Mummy," they said together. "Are you excited for today?" Kate asked, sitting down next to them. "I am," Charlotte said. "I practiced my curtsy all week." "I'm a bit nervous," George admitted. "There will be so many people watching us." "I want to wave at everyone," Louis said, moving his hand back and forth quickly. Kate laughed. "You can wave, Louis, but remember to do it slowly, like we practiced." Just then, Prince William came in. He wasn't wearing his special uniform yet, just regular clothes. The children ran to hug him. "Good morning. Is everyone ready for Grandpa's big day?" William asked, picking up Louis. Outside the palace, hundreds of guards and police were making sure everything was safe. Cars with dark windows were lined up, waiting to take the royal family to Westminster Abbey, the big old church where all kings and queens get their crowns. Back inside, William now wore his special military uniform with shiny medals. He looked very handsome and important. Helpers were with each child, making sure their clothes were perfect. George wore a small uniform like his father's. Charlotte had on a white dress with a matching cape. Louis wore a blue suit and couldn't stop moving around. "Remember," William said to the children, "today we need to be on our best behavior. The whole world will be watching." "Will I be king someday, like Grandpa?" George asked. William put his hand on his son's shoulder. "Yes, someday. But that's a long time from now." Kate came in, looking beautiful in her dress. Everyone in the room stopped to look at her. "You look like a queen, Mummy," Charlotte said. Kate smiled. "Thank you, darling. And you all look perfect." A man in a fancy uniform came to the door. "Your Royal Highnesses, the cars are ready." William looked at his family. They would soon be part of a historic moment that would be in history books forever. "Let's go make Grandpa proud," he said. The family walked together through the grand halls of the palace. Paintings of kings and queens from hundreds of years ago hung on the walls. As they reached the main doors, they could hear the crowd outside. "I can hear the people," Louis said excitedly. "They're here to see Grandpa become king," William explained. "But they're also happy to see us." As the doors opened, the bright light of the morning sun filled the entrance. The Wales family stood together, ready to step out and greet the thousands of people waiting to see them. The big black cars waited outside Kensington Palace. People with cameras stood behind fences, trying to get pictures. Police officers on horses made sure everyone stayed back. The palace doors opened wide, and the royal family walked out into the sunshine. "Wave to the people," Kate said softly to the children. Prince William helped Kate into the first car. The children followed, with George helping his little brother Louis climb in. As the car doors closed, the crowd cheered and waved small British flags. Inside the car, Louis pressed his face against the window. "Look at all the people," he said, his eyes wide with wonder. "Remember to sit up straight," Charlotte told him, gently pulling him back. William smiled at Kate. They both knew Charlotte was just like her mother, always proper, always aware of how to act. The cars moved slowly down the road. People lined both sides, taking pictures and shouting happy words. Some held signs that said, "God save the King," and "We love the royal family." "There are so many people," George said, looking out the window. "Even more than at Christmas." "This is a very special day," William explained. "A new king doesn't happen very often. The last time was when great-grandma became queen, and that was more than 70 years ago." As they drove through London, they passed famous places. Big Ben stood tall against the blue sky. The River Thames sparkled in the sunlight. Everywhere, the city was dressed in red, white, and blue, the colors of the British flag. In the car, Kate checked each child one more time. She fixed George's collar and smoothed Charlotte's hair. Louis was bouncing in his seat with excitement. "We're almost there," Kate said. "Remember what we talked about. Walk slowly, smile nicely, and follow Daddy and me." The cars turned onto the road leading to Westminster Abbey. This huge church was very old, almost 1,000 years. Kings and queens had been crowned here since long ago. Its tall towers seemed to touch the clouds. As they got closer, they could hear music. Trumpets played special songs that were only used for royal events. The sounds echoed off the old stone buildings. "I can hear the trumpets," Louis said, clapping his hands. The car slowed down as it reached the abbey. Outside, important people from all over the world were arriving. There were presidents and prime ministers, princes and princesses from other countries, and famous people from Britain. "Look," William pointed out to George. "See those soldiers in the red uniforms? They're the royal guards. They protect our family and have done so for hundreds of years." George nodded seriously, taking in this information. Someday, these guards would protect him when he was king. The car came to a stop at the great entrance of Westminster Abbey. Large stone steps led up to huge wooden doors that were open wide. Inside, they could see the glow of hundreds of candles. A man in a fancy uniform opened their car door. Outside, the noise was much louder. People cheering, music playing, cameras clicking. "Ready?" William asked his family with a smile. Kate took a deep breath and nodded. This was a moment that they would all remember forever. William stepped out first. He stood tall in his uniform, the medals on his chest shining in the sun. The crowd cheered even louder when they saw him. Next came Kate. As she stepped from the car, everyone gasped at how beautiful she looked. Her cream dress seemed to float around her, and her headpiece sparkled. She smiled and gave a small wave to the people. Then it was time for the children. George came first, looking serious and grown-up. He stood next to his father, back straight and head high. Charlotte followed, stepping carefully in her white shoes. She gave a perfect little curtsy, just as she had practiced. Finally, little Louis jumped out, his face breaking into a huge smile when he saw all the people. He waved with both hands, making everyone laugh and cheer. The Wales family stood together at the entrance to Westminster Abbey. Behind them, their cars drove away. Ahead of them was the grand church where history would be made today. The Wales family stood at the entrance of Westminster Abbey. The huge old building looked even bigger up close. Its stone walls had stood for almost 1,000 years. Kings and queens from long ago had walked through these same doors. "It's so big," whispered Louis, looking up at the tall towers. William took Kate's hand and smiled at her. Then he turned to the children. "Remember to walk slowly," he said quietly. "George, you walk next to me. Charlotte and Louis, you stay with Mummy." A man wearing special clothes came to them. He had a long stick with gold on the end. This was the person who would show them where to go inside. "Your Royal Highnesses," he said with a bow, "please follow me." Inside the abbey, hundreds of candles were lit. The light made the gold and silver things shine. Flowers in white, red, and gold were everywhere. The floor had a long red carpet for people to walk on. As the family walked in, music played. It was sung by a group of men and boys in white robes. Their voices filled the huge space and seemed to float up to the high ceiling. Everyone inside stood up when they saw William and his family. There were more than 2,000 people there. Some wore fancy hats. Others wore uniforms with medals. Many had on beautiful dresses in bright colors. William and Kate nodded to people as they walked past. Some were friends. Others were important people from around the world. Everyone wanted to see the future king and his family. "There's Aunt Zara," Charlotte whispered to Louis, pointing to their cousin who smiled and waved at them. The family walked down the middle of the church. This was called the aisle. It seemed very long to the children. George walked tall, trying to copy his father. Charlotte held her head high like her mother. Louis tried hard not to look at all the people staring at them. At the front of the abbey was a special area. This was where King Charles would sit when he got his crown. Near it were seats for William, Kate, and the children. An old man with a beard and special robes stood waiting for them. This was the Archbishop. He would put the crown on King Charles's head. He smiled at the children and gave a small bow to William and Kate. "Almost there," Kate said softly to the children as they reached their seats. The seats were like fancy chairs with red cushions. They had been made just for this day. Each one had a small card with a name on it. William helped the children sit down. George was next to his father. Charlotte sat between George and her mother. Louis was on Kate's other side. "When will Grandpa come?" Louis asked. "Soon," Kate told him. "We must sit quietly and wait." All around them, more people were coming in and finding their seats. Some smiled at the children. Others took pictures with small cameras. The music kept playing, now louder than before. William leaned over to speak to Kate. "You look beautiful," he said. She smiled back at him, her eyes shining. George looked around at the abbey. The ceiling was very high up with stone shapes that looked like fans. Big windows with colored glass let in light that made patterns on the floor. This place had seen many kings and queens over hundreds of years. Someday, he would get his crown here too. Charlotte sat very still, her hands folded in her lap just like her mother's. She watched everything with curious eyes. She noticed how people acted, what they wore, and how they talked to each other. Louis couldn't sit still. There was too much to see. He swung his legs and pointed at things. Kate gently put her hand on his knee to remind him to be good. Suddenly, the music changed. It became louder and more exciting. Trumpets joined in, making a grand sound. Everyone in the abbey stood up. "It's time," William said to his family. "Grandpa is coming." The children stood up straight. They knew this was the moment everyone had been waiting for. King Charles was about to enter Westminster Abbey for his coronation. Through the big doors at the end of the church, they could see people starting to come in. First came men carrying tall golden sticks. Then came people in special robes carrying important things that would be used in the ceremony. The Wales family watched with everyone else. They were not just royal family members now. They were also grandchildren waiting to see their grandfather become king. The music grew louder as King Charles entered Westminster Abbey. He walked slowly, wearing a long red robe with white fur. On his shoulders was a heavy cape covered in gold designs. 4 men walked behind him, holding the cape up so it wouldn't touch the floor. William felt his heart beat faster. This was his father, soon to be crowned king. Next to him, George's eyes were wide. The boy had never seen his grandfather look so different, so royal. "There's Grandpa," whispered Charlotte to Louis. The little boy's mouth fell open in surprise. King Charles walked down the long aisle. He looked straight ahead, his face serious. When he passed by William and his family, He gave them a quick look and a small smile. This was not just a king and his subjects. This was a father and his son, a grandfather and his grandchildren. Louis wanted to wave, but Kate gently held his hand. "Not now," she whispered. "We need to be very quiet." The king reached the front of the abbey. He stood before a big chair called the throne. The archbishop bowed to him. Then the ceremony began. The archbishop spoke in a loud voice. He talked about duty and God and the country. Some of the words were old and hard to understand. The children tried to listen, but it was difficult. Charlotte sat very straight in her chair. She was old enough to know this was important. George watched everything carefully. Someday this would be his ceremony too. Louis tried to be good, but he started to get bored. He leaned against Kate's arm and played with her bracelet. William noticed Louis getting restless. He caught Kate's eye and gave her a small smile. They both knew how hard it was for a young child to sit still for so long. Even for them, the ceremony seemed to go on and on. The most important part came when the archbishop picked up the crown. It was made of gold and covered with jewels. It sparkled in the light from the candles. This crown was very old. Many kings and queens had worn it before. "Look," Kate whispered to the children. "Watch carefully now." Everyone in the abbey stood up. The archbishop held the crown high so all could see it. Then, slowly, he placed it on King Charles's head. "God save the king," shouted the archbishop. "God save the king." Everyone replied in loud voices. The Wales family joined in. Even Louis shouted the words. The sound filled the huge abbey, echoing off the walls and high ceiling. At that moment, bells began to ring. The sound came from the towers of the abbey and from churches all across London. Outside, soldiers fired guns in a special salute. The noise was so loud that Louis covered his ears. King Charles sat on the throne, the crown on his head. He looked very serious and important. William felt proud of his father, but also a little sad. He knew that his father had waited a long time for this day. One by one, important people came forward to bow to the new king. When it was William's turn, he walked to the throne and bowed low. "I promise to serve you, my sovereign and my father," William said in a clear voice. Then he did something that wasn't part of the ceremony. He looked up at his father and smiled. For a moment, King Charles smiled back. It was a private moment between father and son that the whole world saw. When William returned to his seat, George had a question. "Will I have to bow to you someday?" he whispered. William put his arm around his son's shoulders. "Yes, but that's a long time away. For now, you're just my boy." Kate watched her husband and son. She felt her heart fill with love for her family. They were part of something very old and important, but they were also just people who cared about each other. Louis was now sitting on his mother's lap. The ceremony had been going on for more than an hour. He was tired but trying to be brave. "Is it almost over?" he asked. "Not yet," Kate told him. "But the most important part has happened. Grandpa is now the king." Charlotte was watching everything with shining eyes. She loved the music, the clothes, and the ceremony. It was like a story come to life. "It's just like a fairy tale," she whispered to her mother. Kate smiled. "Yes, but it's also real. And we're part of it." The coronation ceremony continued. After the crown was placed on King Charles's head, there were more prayers and songs. The children tried to stay still, but it was hard. The seats were not very comfortable, and they had been sitting for a long time. Louis began to swing his legs back and forth. Kate put her hand gently on his knee to remind him to be good. Charlotte sat up straight, watching everything with wide eyes. She wanted to remember every part of this special day. George kept glancing at his father, noticing how William watched the ceremony with a serious face. Finally, the archbishop spoke the last prayers. The ceremony was coming to an end. King Charles stood up from the throne, the heavy crown still on his head. He looked different now, more kingly, more serious. He walked slowly down the steps, holding a golden staff in one hand and a special ball called the orb in the other. As the king passed by the Wales family, Louis couldn't help himself. He waved at his grandfather. People nearby smiled at the little boy's excitement. King Charles didn't wave back. He couldn't with his hands full, but his eyes crinkled at the corners, showing he was smiling inside. The king walked down the aisle toward the main doors. Everyone stood as he passed. When he reached the doors, he turned back to look at all the people. For a moment, his eyes met William's. Father and son shared a look that said many things without words. Then King Charles turned and went outside to greet the waiting crowds. "What happens now?" George asked his father. "Now we follow Grandpa," William explained. "We'll go outside and get in the carriages for the parade back to the palace." Kate helped Louis down from his seat. "Remember to walk nicely," she told him. "There are still many people watching." The Wales family joined the line of important people leaving the abbey. Outside, the sunshine was bright after the dim light inside. The crowds cheered loudly when they saw William, Kate, and the children. Big golden carriages waited on the street. King Charles was already sitting in the first one, the biggest and most beautiful. Its roof was made of gold, and it had huge wheels with red and gold paint. 4 white horses pulled this special carriage. William and his family were to ride in the second carriage. It was also very fancy, but not as big as the king's. A real carriage. Louis said with excitement, "Like in my storybooks." A man in a red uniform helped them climb into the carriage. Inside were soft seats covered in red velvet. The children sat across from their parents, facing backward. "Wave to the people, but not too wildly," Kate reminded them as the carriage began to move. The streets of London were packed with happy people. They waved flags and took pictures as the royal carriages went by. Some people had been waiting since early morning to see this moment. "Look how many people came to see Grandpa," Charlotte said, amazed at the crowds. "And to see us," George added, feeling important. The carriage rolled along the streets of London. Famous buildings passed by. Big Ben, the Houses of Parliament, and Trafalgar Square. Everywhere there were decorations in red, white, and blue, the colors of the British flag. Inside the carriage, the family relaxed a little. The hard part of the day was over. William loosened his collar slightly, and Kate adjusted her headpiece, which was beginning to feel heavy. "You were all very good," she told the children. "Especially you, Louis. It's not easy to sit still for so long." Louis beamed with pride at his mother's words. "Was I as good as George and Charlotte?" "You were all excellent," William said. "I'm very proud of you." As they rode through the streets, people threw flowers at the carriages. Some landed inside, and Charlotte picked up a red rose that had fallen on the carriage floor. "Can I keep it?" she asked. "Of course," Kate said. "It will be a nice memory of today." The parade route was long. It would take almost an hour to reach Buckingham Palace. Along the way, there were soldiers in bright uniforms, bands playing music and dancers performing. It was like a big, happy party all through London. George looked thoughtful as he waved to the crowds. "Someday will this be my coronation?" he asked his father. William nodded. "Yes, but that's many years away. First, it will be my turn, and that won't happen for a long time either." "Good," said George. "I don't think I'm ready to be a king yet." William smiled at his son. "No one is ever quite ready, but when the time comes, you will do your duty, just as Grandpa did today, and just as I will someday." The carriage continued its journey through the cheering crowds, carrying the future of the British monarchy toward Buckingham Palace. The carriage carrying the Wales family moved slowly through the streets of London. The wheels made a gentle rumbling sound on the road. People cheered and waved from both sides. Some called out to the children by name. "Charlotte, Louis, George," they shouted, hoping for a wave or a smile. The children were happy to oblige. Louis waved with both hands, making people laugh. Charlotte gave her perfect royal wave, moving her hand gently from side to side, just as she had practiced. George waved too, but was more careful, copying his father's style. "They love you," Kate told the children with a smile. "Can you hear them calling your names?" As the carriage turned a corner, they saw something special. A group of children stood together, holding up letters that spelled "God Save the King." Behind them, other children held up letters spelling "We love the Wales family." "Look," Charlotte pointed. "They made signs for us." William waved at the children with the signs. "That was very thoughtful of them," he said. The carriage passed by many famous places in London. They saw the tall column in Trafalgar Square with the big lions at the bottom. They passed the gates of Green Park, where flowers bloomed in yellow and white. Everywhere, there were flags and pictures of King Charles. Inside the carriage, Louis was getting tired. He leaned against Charlotte's shoulder. His little legs had stopped swinging, and his waves were becoming slower. "Are you sleepy?" Charlotte asked her little brother. Louis shook his head, but his eyes were drooping. "I'm not sleepy," he insisted. "Kings don't get sleepy." Kate and William shared a smile. They knew Louis was fighting to stay awake. It had been a long day for a 5-year-old boy. "It's okay to be tired," Kate told him. "Even kings need to rest sometimes." George was looking ahead, trying to see Buckingham Palace in the distance. "How much longer?" he asked. "Not long now," William answered. "See those trees up ahead? That's the edge of the palace gardens." As they got closer to the palace, the crowds became even bigger. People were packed tightly along the road, standing on tiptoes to see the carriages. Some sat on friends' shoulders. Others had brought small steps to stand on. The noise grew louder. Bands played music, people cheered, and bells rang out from church towers. It was a happy sound, but very loud. Louis covered his ears with his hands. "Too noisy," he said. Kate put her arm around him. "We're almost there," she assured him. Finally, they saw it, the famous front of Buckingham Palace. Its cream-colored walls and many windows looked golden in the afternoon sun. The big clock on the tower showed it was past 3 o'clock. They had been out for almost 5 hours. The gates to the palace stood open. Royal guards in red coats and tall black hats stood on either side. They didn't smile or move, even with all the noise and excitement around them. King Charles's carriage went through the gates first. The people cheered even louder as their new king entered the palace grounds. Then it was the turn of William and his family. As their carriage passed through the gates, William felt a change. Inside the palace grounds, it was quieter. The sounds of the crowd seemed far away now. The carriage rolled along a smooth driveway lined with trees. "We're home," Charlotte said, though of course this wasn't their home. They lived at Kensington Palace, but Buckingham Palace was the main royal palace where they spent many important days. The carriage stopped at the side entrance of the palace. Men in dark suits and women in smart uniforms waited to help them. One opened the carriage door and put down steps for them to use. "Your Royal Highnesses," he said with a bow. William got out first, then turned to help Kate. She stepped down gracefully, her cream dress flowing around her. Then the children climbed out, with George helping Louis jump down the last step. "Where's Grandpa?" Louis asked, looking around. "He's gone in through the main entrance," William explained. "He has special duties to do now." Kate straightened Charlotte's dress and fixed George's collar. They all needed to look their best still. Soon, they would stand on the famous balcony of Buckingham Palace, where the royal family always appeared on special days. "Are you ready?" William asked his family. "We have one more important job today." The children nodded. They knew about the balcony appearance. It was the part many people were waiting for, to see the whole royal family together with their new king. "I'm ready," George said, standing tall. "Me too," Charlotte added, smoothing her dress. Louis yawned but tried to hide it. "I'm ready too," he said, blinking hard to stay awake. Kate smiled at her children. They had done so well today. "Then let's go join Grandpa," she said. "The people are waiting to see us." Inside Buckingham Palace, the Wales family walked through grand halls. The floors were shiny and covered with soft red carpets. Large paintings hung on the walls, pictures of kings and queens from long ago. Crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead, their lights reflecting in big mirrors. "It's so quiet in here," Charlotte whispered. After the noise outside, the palace seemed very peaceful. They followed a palace worker who led them through rooms most people never saw. These were the private parts of the palace, where the royal family could be away from the public. "This way, Your Royal Highnesses," the worker said, opening a tall door. Inside was a room with comfortable chairs and sofas. Other members of the royal family were already there. Princess Anne, King Charles's sister, sat talking with her husband. Prince Edward and his wife Sophie were by the window. Everyone was still dressed in their special clothes from the ceremony. "Uncle Edward," Louis called out, forgetting to be formal. He ran to his uncle, who picked him up with a smile. "Hello there, young man," Edward said. "You did very well today." Kate and William greeted everyone. They all talked about the ceremony, how beautiful it was, and how well things had gone. The adults were given cups of tea, and the children had juice and small sandwiches. They were all hungry after the long morning. A lady in a dark blue dress came into the room. "Your Royal Highnesses," she said. "His Majesty will be ready for the balcony appearance in 15 minutes. William checked his watch. "Thank you," he said. "We'll be ready." Kate took Louis to a small bathroom to wash his face. Some jam from his sandwich had gotten on his cheek. Charlotte went with them to check her hair in the mirror. George stayed with his father, listening to the grown-ups talk. "Did you see all those people?" George asked his father quietly. "There were thousands of them." William nodded. "Yes, they came from all over the country, and some from other countries too, to see Grandpa become king." "Will that many people come to see you become king?" George asked. William put his hand on his son's shoulder. "Probably, but that's a long way off. And even more will come to see you, many years after that." In another part of the palace, King Charles was getting ready. He had changed his heavy coronation robes for a simpler uniform. The crown was now locked safely away. It was too heavy to wear for long. Instead, he wore a smaller crown made just for going on the balcony. Back in the family room, Kate returned with Charlotte and Louis. Louis's face was clean now, and his hair was neatly combed again. Charlotte had fixed her dress and headpiece. They all looked fresh, as if they hadn't spent hours at the ceremony. "Is everyone ready?" William asked. "It's almost time." A phone rang, and the palace worker answered it. After listening for a moment, he turned to the family. "His Majesty is ready. Please follow me to the balcony room." The balcony room was just behind the famous balcony where the royal family appeared to the public. Through the big windows, they could see thousands of people standing outside the palace gates. The crowd filled the whole area and went all the way down the long road called the Mall. King Charles was waiting for them. He stood tall in his uniform, looking every inch a king. But when he saw his grandchildren, his serious face broke into a smile. "Grandpa." Louis ran to him, forgetting again that he should be more formal now that his grandfather was king. Charles knelt down to hug Louis. "Hello, my boy," he said. "Did you enjoy the big parade?" "Yes. I waved to everyone," Louis said proudly. Charles chuckled. "I heard you were very good at waving." The king stood up and smiled at George and Charlotte. "You were all wonderful today," he told them. "I'm very proud of you." Then he turned to William and Kate. "Thank you," he said simply, but his eyes said more than his words. A palace official came into the room. "Your Majesty," he said to Charles, "the RAF flypast is approaching. It's time." Charles nodded. "Very well." He looked at his family. "Shall we?" The big glass doors to the balcony were opened. The sound of the crowd flooded in, thousands of people cheering and shouting. The noise was even louder than before. "Remember," Kate told the children quietly, "stand tall, smile, and wave nicely." King Charles stepped out onto the balcony first. The cheers grew so loud that Louis covered his ears again. Then William and Kate followed, with the children between them. When the people saw the whole royal family, they cheered even more. Flags waved, and people jumped up and down with excitement. Some even cried happy tears. The Wales family stood on the balcony of Buckingham Palace, looking out at the sea of happy faces. This was a moment they would remember forever. Standing on the balcony of Buckingham Palace, the royal family waved to the huge crowd. The people below filled the whole area in front of the palace. Some had climbed lamp posts to get a better view. Others sat on their friends' shoulders. Everyone wanted to see the new king and his family. "Look up," William said to the children. "The planes are coming." In the sky, they could see airplanes flying toward the palace. This was the RAF Flypast, a special air show by the Royal Air Force to honor the new king. First came helicopters, flying low and slow. Then came bigger planes in neat rows. "Wow!" Louis shouted, pointing up. His tiredness was gone now. This was much more exciting than the long ceremony. The crowd cheered as each new group of planes flew over. The pilots had practiced for weeks to get everything perfect for this special day. "Look at the colors," Charlotte said as the red arrows came into view. These planes left trails of red, white, and blue smoke behind them, the colors of the British flag. The smoke made patterns in the sky above the palace. King Charles stood tall, watching the planes with a proud smile. As a young man, he had been a pilot himself. Next to him, William pointed out different types of planes to George, who listened with great interest. "That's a Typhoon," William explained. "And those are the Hurricanes and Spitfires. They're very old planes from the Second World War." The flypast lasted about 6 minutes. When the last planes disappeared, the crowd cheered louder than ever. It was the perfect end to the coronation celebrations. "Time to go inside," Kate said to the children after a few more minutes of waving. The family stepped back into the palace. The glass doors closed behind them, shutting out the noise of the crowd. Inside, palace workers waited with drinks and small cakes for everyone. "You were very good," King Charles told his grandchildren. "Especially you, Louis. I know it was a long day for a young boy." Louis smiled shyly at his grandfather. He wasn't used to seeing him wearing a crown, even the smaller one he had on now. "Can I touch your crown?" Louis asked suddenly. The adults looked surprised, but Charles laughed. "Just very gently," he said, kneeling down to Louis's level. With great care, Louis reached out and touched the edge of the crown with one finger. "It's hard," he said. "Doesn't it hurt your head?" "A little," Charles admitted. "That's why kings don't wear them all the time." George and Charlotte watched with big eyes. They hadn't expected their grandfather to let Louis touch the crown. But today was special in many ways. A palace worker came into the room. "Your Majesty," he said to Charles, "the Prime Minister is waiting to speak with you." Charles nodded. "Duty calls," he said with a small sigh. He turned to William and Kate. "Thank you both for today. The children were wonderful." He gave each grandchild a quick hug, then left the room. Even on his coronation day, a king had many duties to attend to. "What happens now?" Charlotte asked her mother. "Now we can go home and rest," Kate told her. "It's been a very long day." William checked his watch. "The cars should be ready to take us back to Kensington Palace." The family walked through the grand rooms of Buckingham Palace one more time. Palace workers bowed or curtsied as they passed. Some of the older staff had tears in their eyes. They had seen many royal events, but a coronation was special. Outside, their cars waited at a side entrance, away from the crowds. The family would go back to their own home at Kensington Palace, where they could change out of their formal clothes and relax. As they got into the cars, Louis yawned widely. He couldn't keep his eyes open any longer. Kate pulled him onto her lap, and he rested his head against her shoulder. "Was I good today, Mummy?" he asked sleepily. "You were perfect," she told him, kissing the top of his head. Charlotte sat looking out the window as the car pulled away from Buckingham Palace. She could still see the crowds and the flags. "I'll remember today forever," she said. George nodded. "Me too." He looked at his father. It was a very important day. William smiled at his children. They understood more than he had expected. Yes, it was history being made, and you were all part of it. As the car drove through the palace gates, photographers took final pictures of the Wales family. Tomorrow, these pictures would be in newspapers all around the world. The story would be about King Charles and his coronation, but many people would be just as interested in William, Kate, and their children, the future of the royal family. The car turned onto the quieter streets that would take them home. Inside, Louis had fallen asleep against his mother's shoulder. Charlotte was sitting very straight, still acting like a perfect princess. George was thinking about everything he had seen and heard. William and Kate exchanged a smile over their children's heads. It had been a perfect day, tiring but special. They had done their duty as members of the royal family. But most importantly, they had supported each other as a family. The car carrying the Wales family pulled up to Kensington Palace. Unlike Buckingham Palace, with its huge size and grand gates, Kensington Palace felt more like a home. It was still a palace, but smaller and more comfortable for a family with young children. The car stopped at a private entrance, away from the tourists who visited other parts of the palace. William stepped out first, then helped Kate, who was still holding a sleeping Louis in her arms. George and Charlotte followed, both looking tired but happy. Inside, the hallway was quiet and familiar. Their own staff greeted them with smiles and small bows. It felt good to be home after such a long, exciting day. "I'll take Louis to bed," Kate said softly, not wanting to wake the little boy. "Can we watch ourselves on TV?" Charlotte asked. She knew the coronation had been shown on television all around the world. William smiled. "Just for a little while. It's been a big day, and you need rest too." In the family's private living room, a large TV was already turned on. The news was showing highlights from the coronation. There were pictures of King Charles receiving the crown, of the procession through London, and of the royal family on the balcony. "Look, there we are." George pointed to the screen, where they could see themselves waving to the crowds. Charlotte's eyes widened. "My hair looks nice," she said, pleased with her appearance. William laughed. "Yes, you all looked very smart." Kate returned after putting Louis to bed. She had changed out of her formal dress into something more comfortable. Her hair was loose now, the elegant hairstyle and headpiece removed. She looked more like a regular mother than a princess. "He didn't even wake up when I put him in bed," she said, sitting down beside William. Poor little thing was completely worn out. On the TV, reporters were talking about how well-behaved the children had been, especially Louis, who was known for his funny faces and lively behavior at public events. "They're talking about Louis being good," George told his mother. Kate smiled. "He really was wonderful today. You all were." The family watched the TV for a little while longer. The reporters showed pictures from earlier royal coronations, including the one for Queen Elizabeth I, the children's great-grandmother, who had been queen for 70 years before King Charles. "That was a long time ago," Charlotte said, looking at the black and white pictures from 1953. "Yes, coronations don't happen very often," William explained. "That's why today was so special." After a while, Kate noticed Charlotte trying to hide it on. "I think it's bedtime for both of you," she said gently. Neither child argued, which showed how tired they really were. On normal days, they might have asked to stay up longer. "Will people still be celebrating tomorrow?" George asked as he stood up. "Yes, there are parties planned all across the country," William told him. "But we have a quiet day at home tomorrow. I think we all need it." The children said goodnight to their parents. Kate went with them to help them get ready for bed. William stayed in the living room, watching the end of the news coverage. There was a picture of him bowing to his father during the ceremony. The reporters were talking about how one day William would be king, and after him, George. It was strange to think about, even though William had known it all his life. Later, when Kate returned, she found William looking at his phone. "Anything important?" she asked. "Just a message from Dad. I mean from the king," William said with a small smile. It was still new to think of his father as the king rather than just Dad. "What does he say?" "He thanks us for today and says the children were marvelous. He's especially impressed with Louis for sitting still for so long." William showed her the message. Kate smiled as she read it. "It was a beautiful ceremony. Your father looked very regal." "Yes, he did," William agreed. "It's been a long journey for him." They sat together quietly for a moment, thinking about the day and what it meant for their family. So much would change with Charles as king. William would have new duties, and Kate too. But some things would stay the same, their love for each other and for their children. "The children will remember this day forever," Kate said. "Especially George. He was watching everything so carefully." William nodded. He knows what it means for his future, even at his age. Outside the windows of Kensington Palace, they could hear distant sounds of people still celebrating in London. Fireworks popped in the night sky. Music played from parties in the streets. The nation was celebrating its new king. But inside the palace, the Wales family had found their quiet end to this historic day. The children were asleep, dreaming perhaps of crowns and carriages and cheering crowds. Tomorrow would be a normal day, as normal as life could be for the future King and Queen of England and their 3 children.